We want to thank you for joining us here at the Southwest Church of Christ as we continue a four-part sermon series, this being lesson number 3, on the subject of church leadership. These sermons are designed to equip us here at the Southwest Church of Christ for the possibility of installing additional elders. We are going to ask our members to consider some men or a man that you believe is qualified to serve as an elder, and then we're going to be asking our members to submit those names on the week of August the 30th. There will be mail-outs sent out, and we're going to ask you to write some names down of men that you think can serve as an elder here at the church. And those names are going to be added to the current elders that we have, 3 that are already with us: George Weed, Bill Bowman, and Ron Cole. But if you are a guest as watching the video today, we hope that you will still allow us the blessing of considering this family matter, and that you will still find this to be an enlightening message, one where there can still be some insights gained into really life as a Christian, as we try to live for God. Now, before we get into today's sermon, I want to remind you of the things that we have covered up to this point so far, lesson number 3. In the first lesson 2 weeks ago, we talked about the need for and the names of church leaders. We began to emphasize the essential nature of leadership in every realm of life, and then we began to get into the details or the titles of that are used in Scripture for church leaders. We saw that there were, as it's listed here in Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 11, in the early church there were apostles and prophets. And we saw how they were needed for the infant church until the Scriptures were validated and the Scriptures were completed. And then they were set aside according to 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 8 through 10. And so the apostles and the prophets were the foundation of the church, Jesus being the chief cornerstone. That foundation has been laid, and so we began to look at the other titles listed here in Ephesians 4:11 that are in today's church. They are the leaders. So that would be the pastors. We begin with evangelists, pastors, also called elders, teachers, and then one listed here, not listed here, is deacons. And we talked about those leadership positions last week, noting 2 weeks ago, noting that the elders have been given the authority to oversee a local congregation, and those elders are also described by other titles such as shepherd, pastor, overseer, and bishop. Then last week, we began to look at the qualities that are necessary in order for a man to serve as an elder of a local congregation. They basically boil down to 6 basic categories. Last week we looked at the character category. Today we're going to be looking at reputation and family, and then next week we'll be talking about leadership, service, and faith. And so, reflecting back on last week's lesson, the character qualifications, you can see them listed here. He must be temperate, sober-minded, self-controlled, not given to wine, not violent, not quick-tempered, not covetous. He must be a lover of what is good, and he must be just and holy. Now today, our focus, after having covered the character qualification, we're now going to be looking at reputation and family. Reputation and family. And so let's get right into the 3 reputation qualifications for elders listed in 1 Timothy chapter 3. The 3 of those are blameless, good behavior, and good testimony. So this is what we're going to be considering now. We'll look at the first one, blameless. Now, as I mentioned last week, These qualifications, these reputation qualifications, all the qualifications, do not call for perfection, and they allow for each individual congregation's personal judgment and their own assessment in assessing, in looking at an elder candidate. We saw this in the character qualifications, and we will especially see this today in the reputation and family qualifications. But let's just dive right in and begin to look at the reputation qualifications. Now, blameless is the very first of a list of elder qualifications given in 1 Timothy chapter 3. This word blameless is a word that literally means one who passes examination. And before this qualification here, it could even be said that as you look at the text here, that a man must desire the position of a, well, it says bishop here, which is also overseer, elder, shepherd. He must desire this office. So that's one thing that we sometimes just skip right over, but he must want to serve as an elder. So we don't want someone feeling forced, they're being forced into serving as an elder. He must want to serve, and of course the church must also want him to serve. The Greek word here, blameless, is anapaleptos. It appears here in 1 Timothy 3:2 and also over in the companion passage in Titus chapter 1 verses 6 and 7. And this is one of those things that makes allowing yourself being considered to maybe be an elder of a congregation, it makes it a real challenge. Because quite frankly, if you're being considered as maybe being selected as an elder, the church is looking you over, well, let's just say it this way, you're going to be in the hot seat. You have to be examined. You have to be scrutinized. You have to be proven to be acceptable as a leader of God's people. Again, blameless doesn't mean perfect, but it does mean that his character is tested and approved, and you would see that in the text here in 1 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 10. He must be tested and proven. Let's go to the next one. So that's blameless. The next one is good behavior. The Greek word here, kosmion, appears only in 1 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 2. This is a man who is respectable. He is decent. He has proper conduct, and he has a well-ordered life. So his life is orderly. His life is respectable. His life is well-planned and well-lived. It's the same word used of a Christian woman who, according to 1 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 9, must be, as it says in the text, modest in her apparel or proper. And so he has to have a proper way of carrying himself, must have good behavior. The third one under reputation qualifications is good testimony. And this appears in 1 Timothy chapter 3 in verse 7. The Greek word here is kalein maturion. The idea of being mature or being mature before others. He has a good testimony. Now, there's really nothing difficult about this one. This is one where we basically say he is thought of highly by others. Others speak highly of him. And so this would involve a good standing both in and outside of the church. In fact, since it is from the world that the elder will win souls to Christ, he must have their respect as well. Even outside of the church, he must be thought well of. In fact, as you see here in the text at the end, the last little phrase there, if the world, people in the world do not respect him, then Satan, it says, can trap him and with accusations and discredit him as a leader. Okay, now let's move on to the more challenging category here. We've talked about reputation, and now we're going to move on to talk about family qualifications for elders. You'll see them all listed here. Basically, husband of one wife, having children. The children must be in submission and respect. He must have faithful children. So let's take a look at all of these. These qualifications obviously include his wife and his children. So we'll get to a little later. His wife actually, we're going to see, can can disqualify him. His children can disqualify him by their behavior in the home. But he needs to have the experience of marriage and parenting, and that is assumed, that's also assuming that, of course, he is male, that he is married, and that he is a parent. He needs to be devoted to his wife. He needs to have children that respected him in the home and were led to faith in Christ in the home. There are seemingly gray areas here in these things that we're going to be looking at that we will address, but we're going to try to keep it this morning as basic as we can. So I want to start with the first most obvious one here, and that is that he is a husband. He's called here husband of one wife. Now, again, this husband of one wife, maybe this is the most talked about of all of the qualifications for an elder. There's been lots of discussion on this particular qualification. I suggest that we approach this with a larger view than just the limited English words that we are given here. In fact, it may surprise you to know that the actual Greek word for husband is not used here at all, though it is obvious he must be married. The word translated husband in the text right here is the Greek word andra. And that word andra simply means male as opposed to female. And it's different from the word for mankind, all of man, woman, male or female. Mankind, anthropos. Anthropos is the word for all humans, but andra is the word that means male, and that's the word that's used here. The point here is that he must have the experience of marriage, and that he must prove himself in that arena. Now, make a little side note. I personally don't see the justification for having a man who was once married but is currently an unmarried widower. We could talk about that probably all day long, but that's my assessment of it. We're looking for someone who is currently in the arena of marriage and understands that and can show it to others as he serves as an elder. Well, let's go on now to talk about this husband of one wife. This phrase is a very unique phrase in the New Testament, and it is one that literally would read, one woman man. Mias gune andra. That's the word for man or male, right? Mias, one, gune, woman or wife, and the word andra, male, not all of mankind. So the first challenge that we face with this qualification is that it deals with two peculiarities in the original language. The word, first of all, for wife or woman here, the Greek word gune. It is more accurately, in my estimation, translated woman in this context. Now, the Greeks only had one word that could be used for wife or woman. And it should only be translated wife if the context demands it. Now, see, in this case, I think it doesn't demand it. I mean, we already know he is to be a man and have children, and this woman in his life is going to definitely be his wife. So you could say, well, it should be translated wife, but I'm going to show you why I think it should be translated woman. The second peculiarity we have in the text involves this idiomatic phrase, one woman man. The phrase is an idiom, meaning that it is a unique expression using words that seem to mean one thing, but figuratively mean something else. Probably the best explanation I could give of this to you is if I was speaking to someone who speaks mostly Spanish and is trying to learn English, if I went to them and they didn't know the vernacular and how we talk on the street, if I went and I said to them, "What's up?" they'd probably be looking up. What's up? Well, the sky is up. Clouds are up, right? Well, I don't mean it that way. I'm using a unique idiom or phrase. Maybe even better than that. If I was to come to you and you didn't know English that well, and I would say, I have a friend here. He's a real hard worker. He works 24/7. See, the numbers 24/7 don't translate well. And that's what we have here, Greek words that, well, we've decided to say one husband of one wife, but literally it means a one-woman man. So this idiomatic phrase is, by the way, used only one other time in the New Testament, and this time the gender is flipped. Watch what we're going to see here in 1 Timothy chapter 5 and verse 9. The instructions for widows being on the list for the church to help them says, do not let a widow under 60 years old be taken into the number. That's the list, right? And not unless she has been the wife of one man. You see that? The wife of one man. Married only once? I doubt it very seriously. If it means the woman could only be married once to qualify for this widow's list, if that were true, then why would Paul in that same text down in 1 Timothy chapter 5 and verse 14, why would he tell the younger widows then to remarry or get married again if this would then disqualify them when they got older in life and if their husband died again? They would be still a widow. If they had two husbands that they survived, first one died, second one died, they're still a widow. If they're over 60, what this is talking about is a woman who, when her husband was alive, he was faithful all the way through. Maybe she married again and had another husband. She was faithful all the way through. He died then. You see, she is a one-man woman. That's really what this is talking about. In fact, the NIV bears this out because the NIV translates it in a slightly different way. It says, no widow may be put on the list of widows unless she is over 60 and what? Has been faithful to her husband. That's what we're talking about when we refer to an elder being a one-woman man. He is faithful to his wife. And so this simple understanding of the qualification then erases the need for us to discuss any other ambiguous explanation of the phrase husband of one wife. It is clear that the man be married, that he be a one-woman man, married and faithful and a proven leader in his home. We're not talking about and looking at in this qualification a prohibition against polygamy, that's silly, or a prohibition against divorce, or being married more than once. That's not what it's talking about. In the context of these qualifications, this is a judgment call by the members of the local church, and they're asking the question, is this man a one-woman man? The only black and white issues here in the text are that he must be a man, he must be married, and he must have believing children. Now, what if, let's say that in this case, I'll throw in another kind of what if here. What if the man was unfaithful to a woman? And then, he was once unfaithful, and then he gets married, and then he's faithful to that spouse. If he was once unfaithful, should we let him serve as he had a black mark on his life, right? Well, here's how I would handle that. The qualification to be hospitable. What if, let's say, for the first 20 years of his life, this elder was a very unhospitable person, but then the next 30 years, he was extremely hospitable? Would that disqualify him? You see where I'm going. Same thing with a period of unfaithfulness. If he's faithful now, that's what we're looking at. Oh, and one more thing, by the way. Let's look at the fact that if he's going to serve as an elder, he not only has to be devoted to his wife, but his wife has to be of a certain type of character as well. Likewise, in chapter 3, verse 11, it says, likewise, their wives must be reverent, not slanderers, temperate, faithful in all things. And so he must have a wife that meets these qualifications. A man could be very qualified, but actually have a wife that disqualifies him. Well, let's go on now to talk about his children. Obviously, it says clearly that he must have children. According to 1 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 4, he must have the experience of being a leader among his children as their father. The Greek word here for children, tekna, is a word that literally means offspring. And so it doesn't demand a plurality of children. Any amount of offspring is what we're looking at here. In fact, numerous times this Greek word tekna is used in a general sense in the New Testament, and it doesn't mean more than one child. It means, does he have offspring? The concern here really is with the kind of family that an elder should have, not how large his family must be. All right, let's talk a little bit more about these children. He must have children that are in submission with all reverence or respect. The home is a proving ground, a place of testing to see if a man can be trusted as a leader of God's family. As you know in the text, it says if he can't lead his own family, how can he lead God's family? His children must be submissive, that is, they must be obedient and subject to his rules, and they must be respectful as well. Again, we're not looking for perfection here. As we know, no parent is perfect, but a rebellious child definitely would disqualify a man from serving as an elder. Okay, now let's go over to Titus and notice something else about these children. He must also have faithful children. And this is in the parallel text to 1 Timothy 3, which is Titus 1, giving qualifications for elders. Helps us out a little bit here, letting us know that he must have Christian children, faithful children. Faithful is very simple. It means full of faith. Now, today, if you were to describe someone, if we're going to be kind of looking closer at this word faithful, which is translated believing children in some translations, believing, faithful. Do you know that today if you were to say, this person is a believer, well, if you're among the people of God, we understand that doesn't mean just he has a theological concept of a higher being that he's got. We're talking about someone who is a Christian. And in fact, in 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 2, it refers there to servants obeying their believing masters, and we know that means they're Christian masters. Now, upon leaving the home, though, the elder's adult children are no longer under the direct supervision of their father, and they might leave the faith. So what do we think about that? Or maybe they go through periods in their lives where they are not faithful, unfaithful, faithful, maybe they are not as faithful as they should be at times. Well, we have to look at this in the context that this is all, the focus here is on his house, not necessarily what they do outside his house. This does not mean, of course, that the faith of his adult children, once they have left the home, that has nothing to do with his qualification. But if all his children leave the faith immediately after leaving his home, we should probably be concerned about that. Yet the church also must allow for some independence in children once they become adults. They're going to have their lapses of faith. And so we must understand overall, did he bring his children to faith? Were they in submission? Were they respectful of him? Remember again that we are not looking for perfection in any of these areas. even these two today that we've looked at in reputation or family. So as we examine a man with respect to his reputation in a community or even in the church, and in this area of managing his home, we must use common sense here and personal judgment. That's what we're left with. There's no, we'd like it to be, as I said before, black and white, clear, but it's a matter of assessment. His reputation, maybe it won't win him a popularity contest, and his family life may not put him on the cover of Parenting magazine, but he's a good man. He is respected by his peers. He is a devoted husband. He's a respected father, and he is a proven leader in the home. These are qualities that we're looking for in an elder. And by the way, these pretty much are also qualities that we should all aspire to. As we said, though, perfection is out of our grasp. It is something we should be aiming for, but perfection is not within us. And so as we close today, we always like to extend an invitation. With us being imperfect people as we are, we need a Savior. We need Jesus Christ to come and pay for our sins, and He did just that. That's the gospel message. We love to talk about elders and church leadership, but it's all about salvation. And so as we get ready to close this video today, we want to know that where you stand with the Lord. If you're listening to this, maybe you're not a Christian, and we would certainly love it if you would call upon us at the Southwest Church of Christ. You can call our church office, arrange a Bible study, or just a visit with any of our ministers. I'm the pulpit minister, would love to visit with you and encourage you in any way that we can. Maybe share that sweet gospel with you, and if you're wanting to become a Christian, we want to help you with that. Our members are listening to this video, and so if you're struggling with something that you need prayers of the members here, we want to encourage you to make that known to us. Thank you so much for joining us, and God bless.